Shalom. I don't know if I can stop coughing long enough to do this, but I figured I would actually try to interpret some of the Yiddishisms and stuff that Rabbi Mollot and Chezi gave people. So if anybody wants to join me for the ride, you can. I don't think I'll be looking at the comments so much, but maybe. We'll see. Okay, so I go on a vacation and Chezi decides to, I was actually driving while they were having this conversation, and I didn't get to listen to it because I was going through the mountains. I was like, he's going to be saying Zionist stuff. And he was. God have mercy on our souls.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Rabbi Mollot will be joining us very shortly, where we are going to have a hopefully enjoyable conversation about Judaism. We'll relate to some of the stuff in this little corner, and we'll try to, as best as possible, not have too much inside baseball, and try to translate as much as possible so people could feel properly engaged. So I'm just going to wait for the rabbi, and we'll get going.
Now, I love it when Chezi starts shackling. He shackles side to side. And that's when you can tell somebody who's like actually been to yeshiva is really thinking about something, is when they start shackling. That's what it's called, shackling.
Just chattings. I'm going to keep this. I'm not going to be bringing people in. I'm going to be speaking to the rabbi, and then following which perhaps we'll open it up for classic, either just live chat or anyone could join, but we'll play it by ear.
And it was 5 hours long.
A link, by the way, to a short clip from Jordan Peterson's lecture in Israel a few months ago, which to me was sort of mind-boggling. Both the reaction of the crowd, the fact that he was saying what he was saying. So I'm still a few months in.
So in the clip,
ruminating on that.
Jordan Peterson's like, "Hey Jews, the world looks to you. Like, be good Jews." And Chezi's sitting there and be like, wow, this is what rabbis say all the time, and people like lose their minds because they say this is racist or whatever, and then Jordan Peterson is saying it and people were apparently really excited. Yeah.
But I thought it would be nice to share, so you guys are welcome to take a look and let me know your thoughts.
I do have to say it's an interesting experience as a Jew to have a Gentile come up to me and say, "Hey, Jew, be a good Jew."
Hello. I don't hear you. Your mic must be off.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hi, how's my audio?
You're great.
Yes.
Success.
Okay. Are we live?
We are live.
Okay. I'm like a minute late.
It's all good. It's all good. What does time even mean? But thank you again for joining. I really enjoyed hearing your conversation with Jacob.
It was lots of fun.
Yeah, he's definitely a fun character, and I
He's
was
a
also
fun guy. Yeah.
enjoying the back and forth online over the last few weeks, months. I thought in this conversation, while it's still going to be focused on Judaism, I was saying earlier that maybe we'll have like a little less. We're not going to be able to avoid the some of the jargon, but I do want to try to have some of it accessible to the people watching this, of course. So
yeah, I definitely attempt to be understood by all.
Yeah.
Sometimes inevitably,
Of course.
you can't make that happen, but I try the best I can.
So if you don't mind, before I get in, I have like a list of some stuff I thought we could discuss that I'll share with you, but I wanted to know if we could just do just a small introduction. I don't know sort of your background story so much, or like where you're coming at this from. What are you doing in this space? What does the rabbi do?
Okay, a small introduction.
So, Chezi was he was starting out kind of being a little bit how I was when I first got to know Rabbi Mollot. And he's speaking in the third person. What does the rabbi do? Now, if you listen to my discussion with Rabbi Levin, you'll see that I only refer to him in the third person. I don't actually say you, because that's kind of a formal way of speaking, especially in Yiddish and Hebrew, to somebody who, and then we translate it to English. When somebody is a rabbi of a particularly high caliber. Now, I love Rabbi Mollot, and when I said that he's the highest form of rabbi, he teaches little kids. In a sense, yeah, you don't get you don't get hired to teach little kids in a religious Jewish school unless you're a good person. Like that's an important place, right? But the rabbis who do teach little kids, they don't get as much respect as a rabbi who is the head of a rabbinic court, or Rabbi Levin was was a Rosh Chabura at the Mir Yeshiva, which you could say is kind of like a full professorship at a major university, right? The Mir Yeshiva is the largest yeshiva in the world, really, I believe, but in Jerusalem. And a lot of people study there because they actually don't really turn anybody away, right? And frankly, I don't even think they charge really tuition so much. It's like, if you can afford to be there in Jerusalem and come to their classes, they'll let you come. But to actually be somebody who's teaching, that's different. And then to be a Rosh Chabura is kind of like being a professor there, right? So that's the Mir Yeshiva. They'll be talking about other yeshivas.
A small introduction. I don't know how to make a small introduction, but okay. So my background is I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I mentioned that Jacob's broadcast. Did I freeze? Am I still with you?
You're with me.
Yeah. For some reason, I keep seeing myself freeze, but I don't know why. Okay. As I mentioned on Jacob's channel, I grew up in a bit of a Jewishly confusing home because my two parents grew up secular and my father became religious.
My stream should be on YouTube. Just checking because somebody sent me. Yeah, My live stream is on YouTube. Not sure. I think it's fine.
After they married, and my mother did not. You know, it was kind of like, well, I didn't bargain for this and we got married, so I don't agree to it. But so I grew up with kind of that mixed message of, you know, keeping Torah on one hand and not keeping Torah on the other hand. And my parents split up, and, you know, I had to go through a lot of personal soul searching to decide on my path. And it wasn't always simple to know which way things were going. But in all that mess, I got a modern Orthodox education and I would say a prestigious modern Orthodox school. I got involved with NCSY, which
so that's National Council of Synagogue Youth. That was the Orthodox Union's young people's organization, and it was a kiruv organization. It was an organization that had children who weren't necessarily from religious homes, right, or kept things religiously. And Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, who one of the great known rabbis, and frankly, like, all of his books are good. Like, if you want good Jewish books, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan books, they're all good. And he himself, so his parents died and he was an orphan. I believe he was 16 when he was orphaned by his mother. His father had died. His mother died. He hadn't been religiously involved at all. He went to synagogue to say Kaddish for his mother. Somebody befriended him. A Hasidic young man became his friend. He became involved in the religious community. Over the next 10 years, he actually ended up with getting Dayanut, which is the highest form of rabbinic ordination, from the Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem. And at age 25, which is very young for Dayanut, especially considering he didn't even know how to say Kaddish when he went to say Kaddish for his mom. And then he went and got a master's degree in physics, and he became a rabbi, and he was very involved in NCSY. And so NCSY, a lot of people in NCSY, a lot of people oh, okay. So apparently the bot isn't working perfectly with my YouTube. Okay. And so NCSY became this thing where you know, it was Orthodox Judaism available to young people, even if their parents weren't so religious. So, and that actually led to a lot of people who are being thing. And if you have the Bridges of Meaning venture from the fishing trip, which is a collectible item, it's actually an NCSY venture. So, yeah. I hope that clears up what NCSY is.
Turned me on really to Yiddishkeit. I would say prior to that, what my modern Orthodox.
Oh, and NCSY is affiliated. It's through the Orthodox Union, which is the largest. It's the largest organization of Orthodox rabbis, and it's mostly modern. It represents modern Orthodoxy, really.
Education had accomplished was to turn me off totally from Judaism and make me want to be anything but Jewish. And I was pretty set that that was the path I was going to take, was jump off the deep end into, just being anything but Jewish. And when I accidentally ended up involved with NCSY, and for the viewers who don't know, it's a youth group that's not school oriented. It's what you might call informal education or experiential education. It's a youth group for Jewish teens from any background. And I got involved with that almost accidentally, which is a long story that I won't go into. But I would say in that environment, I was finding myself enjoying being Jewish and doing Jewish things for the first time in my life. And at the end of my high school years, it made me think, like, I was on the path to say, like, when I turn 18, I'm out of here. And now I almost feel like I discovered something new that I don't even really know what I'm abandoning. And I thought I did, but now I see I don't. So that's when I decided to go to Israel for the year after high school, which a lot of people with that upbringing do, but I was totally opposed to it. And I changed my mind on that. I ended up spending a year in Or Sameach, the yeshiva that.
So I went to Or Sameach for a year as well. And so what happens in a lot of modern Orthodox circles is you finish high school and you go to Israel for a year. And that's really when you decide, am I going to be a religious person? Am I not going to be a religious person? And a lot of people actually, so it's called flipping out, and there are actually documentaries about it. Some people become really religious, and some people, it's often that year when you really decide what kind of Jewish life you want to lead for Orthodox kids, right? Now, I wasn't raised in that environment at all. So I actually ended up going to Or Sameach after college. And they have a special program for after college for people like me. But so Rabbi Mollot went to Or Sameach. And Or Sameach is one of the bigger, more well-known yeshivas for English-speaking people from not a strong background, right? Depends, but generally people who don't have the strongest background in Jewish learning. So Rabbi Mollot, apparently he had more than most people do who go to Or Sameach like me and him.
That Jacob mentioned, followed by finishing my college degree or doing a college degree altogether. But I would say that 1 year in Or Sameach when I...
By the way, those of you guys who know Dov, who was also in the area, in this little corner for a while, I don't know what he's up to. Not a big fan of mine. Dov was also, he also went to Or Sameach.
I was in this very warm, nurturing, mature yeshiva environment with teachers who were extremely scholarly, but also at the same time warm and embracing, kind of like a family. And I lived in a community where people were very committed to Torah, and Torah kind of defined their life in a way that I had never seen in the modern Orthodox world, where it's just kind of like you're like.
So Or Sameach is already considered kind of Haredi, even though they try not to get involved in the various politics of like the various corners of Orthodox Judaism. Really, there are no Israeli flags at Or Sameach, right? They're already moving out of the modern Orthodox camp, really. And then one thing I spoke to Rabbi Mollot was kind of the fight that there was, because one of the rabbis, well-known rabbis at Or Sameach, was taped saying some horrible things about Chabad that he should have been fired for, and he kind of sort of almost was forced to apologize.
Growing up, my identity was like, I'm an American kid who happens to be Jewish, and my obligations as a Jew kind of get in the way of the other part of my identity, being the American kid I want to be. Judaism was in the way, stopping me from being happy. And here I saw a place where people, their entire life was defined by Torah. It wasn't just like a hobby, it was life itself. And I got very turned on.
And this is why I couldn't be serious about modern Orthodoxy personally, right? Because when it comes down to it, like modern Orthodoxy, and this is my disagreement with Yosef, who thinks of himself as modern Orthodox, and Chezi, who thinks of himself as modern Orthodox. When it comes down to it, I I think when you look into modern Orthodoxy, it's just incoherent. It really is.
By that, and getting to know some of these families, going to Shabbos meals and things like that, I just saw something I had never seen before, and I said, "This is so beautiful. I want this." So even though I went to college, and that's a whole other story, my basic overall trajectory was I want to go back to Yerushalayim, that's Jerusalem. I want to go back into Torah study, and I want to build the kind of life that I saw there that others were building. And I did that. After college, I went back to Jerusalem to study in Or Sameach. I got married. I spent a number of years in the Kollel, which is basically what married men who study in the yeshiva are called a Kollel. And I got some rabbi papers while I was at it, training in pedagogy and Jewish outreach, what we call kiruv, what's called rabbinic leadership, and I ended up actually falling so in love with the lifestyle that I stayed in Jerusalem, building my family for about 7 years in various yeshivas in Kollel, including Torah's Moshe, also known as Tomo, for those who are aware. I learned in Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz's Kollel, the Jerusalem Kollel, which is quite well known. Rabbi Berkowitz today is the Rosh Yeshiva, the dean of the Eish Torah Yeshiva, which is very well known.
So Eish Torah is the other than Or Sameach. It's the other well-known yeshiva for people who come from a not very Orthodox background in the same milieu, right? So Eish Torah and Or Sameach are kind of competitors, and the reason I went to Or Sameach as opposed to Eish Torah is more like they talk to you about like the Torah codes and try to make you excited about Judaism, and then they believe that will mean ultimately you will eventually want to study Talmud and stuff like that a lot. Whereas Or Sameach is like, here, let's teach you Talmud, and that will give you a good background. So that's the difference between Eish and Or Sameach, but they're in the same space. They're in the same yeshiva space in Jerusalem.
And eventually, 7 years and 3.5 kids later, because we had our fourth on the way, we moved to New York. I taught in New York for 3 years. And then we moved to Seattle, Washington, where I taught for 8 years. And now we're living in Houston, Texas, where I'm teaching. And all along, I always felt that the same fire that was ignited under me, I felt all along the way, I had that ability to kind of light other people's fire. That was the experience I had interacting with others, is that just like I was fired up, I was able to get other people fired up about Torah and Judaism. And it was very rewarding and fulfilling for me to be able to do that, which is why I pursued a career in education. But when I kind of found the online space, I saw a potential there to do much more than what I was doing in my quote unquote 9 to 5. So over time, I kind of created this online persona and different social media accounts where I try to spread my excitement for Torah in the various ways that I do. I would say it's still at something of a fledgling state, but that's kind of where we find ourselves now. People have, thank God, been attracted to my teaching. And so I've been invited on different platforms, like Jacob mentioned, Tanakh Talk now, which is a rather large channel where I teach regularly. I'll be teaching this afternoon, the Parsha class. Jacob reached out to me, having seen me on that platform. We connected and finally spoke kind of face to face, quote unquote, yesterday. Now we're talking. So that's kind of where I've been and where I am now.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. That definitely puts things into certain context for me. I'll give you a little follow-up on myself, and then we'll dive in a little more. So born and raised in Israel. My mother and father made Aliyah, ascended. They moved to Israel.
Yeah, so Aliyah is moving to Israel. So
in the early 80s, a few years following my twin sister and I were born here. The rest of my siblings were born in the States. But I grew up here all my life. What you would consider, again, these terms are sort of loose terms, but Dati Leumi, so national religion.
Yeah, so the Dati Leumi are the people who place a religious significance on the political state of Israel. Heretic.
Religious, which is sort of like Israel's version of modern Orthodox, but
so the modern Orthodox tend to be Dati Leumi, and in Israel, the communities that are Dati Leumi also tend to be the ones who don't take Judaism very seriously. Yes, the Chezi's not going to like this characterization, but it's true.
Potentially, at times, it's considered a little more religious, but I don't know if that's even true anymore.
So there have started being strands of Dati Leumi, especially second, third generation people who take Judaism more and more seriously. And only half of those are people who are violent extremists who should be completely thrown out of the Jewish community for having horrible ideas and who are beyond the line. There's some of them who are very nice people, who are very religious and still have these heretical ideas.
But definitely a very Torah-filled family, and the pursuit was, while there was definitely a modern pursuit of, my father's a professor, my mother, she taught Torah, but she also was an educator. But there was constant learning, and that was sort of the framework around that. So my father was a psychologist that was being, doing psychology via the prism of the Torah, and then how that relates to many different things. So that was always the framework. I, after high school, went into what's called in Israel Hesder program, which is you learn and you do the army, but I stayed there a little longer. I ended up being there.
Okay, so in Israel, one of the big fights is over mandatory conscription into the army. Generally, everybody has to, after high school, go into the army. Back when Israel was first founded, there was a sort of agreement made with the ultra-Orthodox community that if you're in yeshiva, you don't have to serve in the army. And this wasn't a huge problem back when it first started because there were so few people that this applied to. Well, first of all, the religious community grew and grew and grew. And so they became a big part of the economy of the community. And now they're a pretty big part of the community. And the people who went to the army resented the people who didn't go to the army. And so kind of this thing came out where if you were in a yeshiva and you didn't go to the army and you stayed in the yeshiva until you weren't even fit to go to the army, which is very, very long, or, then, so this culture of resentment came out. And people would go into yeshivas because they didn't want to serve in the army. And people would stay in yeshiva because if they left the yeshiva, they would have to go into the army, right? And then, so like, it's become a huge thing of resentment, point of resentment. Now, a few years ago, there was the Tal Commission. Oh, God. And the Haredi rabbis were like, you know what? Okay, fine. We'll have our kids go into the army at age 25. They'll stay in the yeshiva, and at age 25, they'll go into the army. And the army's like, no, that's too late. We can't brainwash them. They didn't say that exactly, but that's exactly how the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, interpreted that thing of, oh no, it has to be 18-year-olds. It's like, you know what? We'll send our kids at 25. We're not going to send our kids at 18. And this is a huge fight in Israel still. And the heretics, the Dati Leumi, kind of joking, kind of not. So they used to send their kids into the army just at 18. And there's been a hester, a kind of agreement, right? And what they do is now there are these hester yeshivas where people who are in the army spend half the day learning and half the day in the army, right? So they start at 18 and they stay longer than the 3 years for men, 2 years for women, and they stay for 4 or 5 years, and they learn in yeshiva and they're in the army at the same time. So that's what he's talking about with hesder, and that's what the Dati Leumi, the religious, the nationalist religious do.
6 years. I also started on a track for my rabbi papers, but I was doing it for the money and the women.
So he's obviously joking. There's no money and rap. Like, yeah, if you're the top student, so I mean, I don't know how much in modern Orthodox circles and in nationalist circles there's as much of arranging of marriages as there are in the religious, in the very religious community. In the very religious community, if you're the top student, you get to marry the rabbi's daughter, which is, but it's less so. But like, yeah, I mean, if you're one of the top students, you get better dates, you get better shidduchim, you get, you're considered some more eligible, right? But I don't think he's so much talking about that. And as far as money, yeah, not much money. Chezi obviously makes a lot more money now than he would as a rabbi.
So I stopped. Exactly. I stopped midway, and in my army services, I was a chaplain in the Air Force, and I spent, when I came back from the army, I did 2 more years in yeshiva. It's in the old city called Yeshiva Kotel.
Okay, so this is where Chezi gives his humble brag. He's signaling something he never wanted to say to me out loud. So Yeshiva Kotel, right? So that is like in Dati Leumi circles, in the religious Zionist circles, that's like the highest yeshiva, right? And so he went after his army service. He went for 2 years there, and apparently he was a meishiv.
The Western Wall yeshiva, and I was it's called a shoelu mashiv. You get asked some questions, and sometimes
you get asked some questions. Okay, so I hope by now you know about Judaism enough to know that if you get asked some questions, yeah. So the best way I can put being a meishiv at the Kotel is Yeshivat HaKotel. Basically, he's saying, I graduated at the top of my class at MIT, right? I was the valedictorian at MIT. Because what's a meishiv? So in yeshiva, you have your classes, but you spend most of your time in the Beit Midrash, which is a huge study hall. And with your study partner, because it's all partnered learning, you always have a study partner in yeshivas. And unlike a library, it's filled with people and it's really, really noisy. I miss the din of a Beit Midrash. Oh my God. But so the Beit Midrash, everybody's arguing, right? Depends how big the Beit Midrash is. But Yeshivat HaKotel, never been there. They don't like people, and I wouldn't have gone tourist, touring, but especially not at Yeshivat HaKotel with all those Zionists there. But I'm sure they have a large Beit Midrash, and people are there after their classes, not during their class time, studying with their study partner, arguing over whatever they're arguing, whatever they're studying, right? Well, what happens when you and your partner, you're both stuck on something? Well, if there's somebody to unstuck you, right, to kind of help you along, you're gonna have to wait until next class, right? So there's a meishiv, and in the bigger yeshivas there could be multiple meishivs, but usually there's one. I don't know how Yeshivat HaKotel does it, but if there's only one, then that's the best student in the entire class, right? And he's the one who everybody else can go and ask. So like, instead of like, so this is kind of like being a graduate, right? You're the person who everybody else, whatever class they're in, if they don't know, like, you're the tutor, you're right. So being a meishiv is a big deal, and being a meishiv at Yeshivat HaKotel, it's a big deal. And like, Chezi just wants to make clear, okay, I'm not a putz. He's not a putz.
And you have an answer for them, and I would give some classes on some Jewish philosophy, theology.
So, okay, now he is the one who's giving the classes on Musar, on philosophy, and so he's the one who's kind of responsible for the ethical. So, and that's kind of like homeroom, right? So, I mean, he's making clear without making like, he's giving the hints. Okay, I was the guy.
But ultimately, I then left that track, got married, went into law school, worked as a lawyer, stopped, and went into a design and architecture career, and have been doing that for the last.
And he's one of the most successful architects in Israel. And yes, Chezi is just a tiny bit of an impressive person. Just tiny bit. You may have noticed.
10 years. Wow. So definitely got off that track. However, I have always been doing my own learning, and I hopefully growing internally and externally. But I have the opportunity to constantly be interacting with different clients of mine usually from the States, and they come from different. Some of them are Reform, some of them are modern Orthodox, some of them are what we would call yeshivish, I guess, which are a little more. How would you best categorize that?
A good question. I mean, like yeshivish, right?
So,
people say
so
ultra orthodox. People,
yeah,
say,
sure. So more. I mean,
it's.
I take some offense to that, not from you, obviously, but yes. So a little more orthodox, or seemingly so, and I, due to the nature of my job, when I'm with them, so it's usually 3 to 4 days of intense shopping. Now, I pick them up early in the morning at around 9. I drop them off at around 8 o'clock at night. It's a lot of driving around Jerusalem. We can't be talking about what color their tile is for all those hours. So we always get into education, religion, the status of the Jewish people. These are things that are on my mind constantly. as it relates to this little corner of the internet, they discuss the meaning crisis a lot. And I was seeing how, while in many ways religions in general and Judaism, I think also specifically, has been protected in a certain way from the meaning crisis. However, I do feel that it is making its way towards religions in general and Judaism. And I was trying to anticipate or try to see, what this means towards the community. So having said that, because the conversation with Jacob, while informative, was sort of a mix of conversations, I was thinking of discussing sort of the interior status of the Jewish community with you a little, and then having a conversation about the exterior relationship that we have with other nations, other religions, potentially. If that would be okay with you.
Yeah, well, I'll see what I can contribute.
Right.
So I don't consider myself an expert.
One is on the interior front. So this is something that I've been on my own little crusade, and I've been talking to some more prominent rabbis in Israel about these topics, and it would be interesting to me sort of to gauge where you're coming at this from your position. So, as some
Rabbi Father Eric says, "Too bad you don't have a Jewish pope to handle excommunication." The fact is, there's been one. In the past 20 years, I can think of 2 famous excommunications, and to be excommunicated, to be put in cherem in Hebrew, in Jewish circles, you have to at least be a prominent rabbi. So you have to be a community leader in order for anybody to want to excommunicate you officially. So we kind of sort of do, but people only do that to people who are really in their own communities. It's kind of a warning, right? And the fact is, within Judaism, it's not like Chezi, Yosef, and I can very much agree. There are people who, including people who are members of the Knesset, who claim to be religious Jews, that I think all 3 of us would. I don't know if we constituted a beit din, a rabbinic court, if we would put that person in cherem. But let's put it this way: he's not going to be invited to speak at the Bridges of Meaning Jewish conference ever.
Someone who does his best to adhere to the guidelines and lifestyle of an Orthodox Jew, best of my understanding. It is very important for me to maintain this divine operating system we have called Judaism. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's wonderful, Judean Christian values and where the world looks at today. So there's a whole nice package that Judaism comes with. However, due to its divine nature and its system that it's built over the last 2,000 years of exile, there are times when the Jewish community and Jewish leadership is required to make adjustments or certain changes, which we believe to be divine changes through their authority to do so, that allow us to adapt properly for the changing times. So whether it's an extreme example of one should not write down the oral Torah, to then the need to write down the oral Torah, to one should not get paid for teaching Torah, to then we could now get paid to teaching Torah.
So these are actual takanot that famously were made in Jewish history. How do you spell takana? A takana literally means a fixing of something. What do we call the takanot of Rabbeinu Gershom? Edicts, edicts is how it gets translated. Like great rabbis have at various times like actually went. So one of the most famous is the Takana of Rabbeinu Gershom that Ashkenazim cannot marry more than one wife. That's a famous takana, right? Or the ones that he talks about here.
One should not teach women Torah, and we then managed to find the.
Now that's okay. Now we're not talking takanas anymore. Now we're talking about rabbis, especially in the most recent generation. We're like, no, we have to have actual teachings of, and the Chafetz Chaim and the Rebbe were very, very well-known and respected rabbis who were like, hey, we need to teach our girls more Torah, more formally. You need to have female education, which some people, including, for example, in Satmar, are still against. Well, about, I don't know how many years ago, 5 or 10 years ago, something around there, 4 girls from a Satmar yeshiva went and got baptized publicly, and you can find the videos. It was like, are you really sure? You're sure, right? You're doing it. You're doing it right. But
the room where that happens, and while people could look at that as, how is it happening with a divine system? If we look at ourselves as constantly growing and constantly digging in deeper and understanding more, we could see how these truths are always there. However, so far, the religious community and leadership has been successful in being reactive to the world changes and making these changes slowly and methodically. It is a very dense web, and even if there's seemingly things that seem less relevant for cultural reasons, historical reasons, medical reasons, it's not so easy to just take out that Jenga tile, because you might be damaging the foundation. And one has to take that obviously very seriously when considering making these changes. However, I do believe that
he meant Jenga tile, not Jacob tile.
Increasingly, the rate of change in society, technological, psychological, and now biological and technological, are happening in a rate that far surpasses anything the Jewish community.
I think he's just wrong with that. And if you ask John Vervaeke, he's also he will tell you that people keep on talking about the rate of technological change. And I was actually hoping that when Yosef and Chezi spoke, Yosef would kind of clarify to Chezi that the rate of technological change, like Chezi's believing a lot of the hype that I just don't think exists. And if you listen to John Vervaeke's latest video, which you should, it was wonderful, and I paused it several times to just try to understand the stuff he was saying. One of the things he does say is stop believing the hype. There's a lot of hype about technological change, and you can listen to Eric Weinstein and Peter Thiel talking about it. We are definitely overemphasizing how much technological change is going on. And then when you have that, in addition to Chezi's all of his bad heretical thinking, you end up saying the types of things he says after this, which made me want to pull my hair out of my head, which is kind of difficult when you don't have much hair.
Or the community at large has ever dealt with. And from what I've seen from my conversations is I get answers where I get looks of, yes, what you're saying is an issue. Yes, we understand. And my issue to them always is, but I'm a designer architect. Like, why am I having this discussion with you? Like these are your discussions to be having. I'm just here saying, hey, the canary in the coal mine. So
Chezi doesn't want to be a rabbi. Too bad, Rabbi Chezi. I keep on telling him, your grandfather is turning 100. He should live to be 120. Get ordained from your grandfather, Chezi. But this is the problem I have, is you get people, I won't even bother naming their names, who go to a dinky whatever, a diploma mill and like get a yore and don't know anything, and then they grow these long beards and go on YouTube and they call themselves rabbi, and like, and then you get somebody like Chezi who's a meishiv at Yeshivat HaKotel, and you say to him, go take your stupid exam or go ask your grandfather to ordain you. And he's like, I'm a designer architect. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not a rabbi. You're a rabbi.
The examples I give them would be, there's a CRISPR technology. I don't know if you're aware of CRISPR technology.
It's with the genes and things like that.
So in
You're much more of a rabbi than any of these putzes walking around calling themselves rabbis.
China, the doctor was arrested, but he took 2 embryos and made sure they can never get AIDS. And he also played with their intelligence. Now, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, when I'm tweaking genes.
Nechama!
Hello.
Hello. Do you
How
have
are you,
commentary?
Jacob?
Good.
I have so much. First
Okay.
of all, I will agree with you. Chezi is 100% a rabbi, at least in my book. So, he could say whatever he wants, but I 100% fully support Chezi in everything and anything he wants to do. I have no opinion on how he wants to spend his life. I think everything he does is fabulous, including all the time he spends here, which I adore.
Oh,
So,
but
yes.
I adore the man. I just think he should. Why doesn't he just ask his grandfather? I'm sure his grandfather would ordain him.
Well, does he want to be a rabbi?
No.
Okay, so let him not be a rabbi.
No.
What's the problem?
That's not. No. No. B'makom she'ein ish. B'makom she'ein ish. No, that's not how it works. B'makom she'ein ish. And if you want to explain it to them, explain to them what I'm saying.
I actually don't know the reference, so you're going to have to help me out.
Okay, so it's from Pirkei Avot. It says, in the place that there are no men, try to be a man, right?
Yeah.
And so when there aren't people around to do something that needs to be done, even if you're not, you have to take responsibility. And that's what provides meaning in life. That's actually what provides meaning in life. Is that when you look around and you see, hey, there's something that maybe I'm not capable of doing and I don't want to do, but it needs to be done and I'm going to do it. Right? Yeah. Because that's my responsibility and it's not about me. And so pursuing what you want is not how we become happy. Happiness is a byproduct of taking on responsibility. So
seeing a gap and filling it. But I would argue Jacob is doing that. You and I both see him as a rabbi, and there's a reason that we do. So look, there's no problem. Chezi could, for the next 30 years, he could say, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a rabbi. It doesn't matter. He's filling the gap. But look, who Jacob, he is following, at least from what I could observe, he's following this impetus he has to have these conversations, which is like doing such a good service. I actually made this point a while ago, and which was the fact that he's not a rabbi allows him to have these conversations. So let him be an undercover rabbi. He's doing the job that nobody else can do. Who else is doing what Chezi can do right now?
Okay, but then I have people who are contacting me and asking me, what do I do about having a rabbi? and they're Noachides. And who are they going to go to? And they don't know. So I've told the story of the Posek and the Putz a billion times, but I'm going to tell it again.
Mm-hmm.
And this has happened to me in many different ways. So I've turned it into a single story, but it's basically the same thing happened many times, which is I know a Posek who, which is a rabbi who is a decizer. Like it's a very competent rabbi, right? I know a Posek who doesn't wear a long jacket. He wears a short jacket because he doesn't want to put on any airs, right? And barely anybody knows who he is, but the people who know who he is, right?
Right.
And I walk with him into a synagogue and nobody notices, nobody stands up, right? Because in an Orthodox synagogue, when a Posek walks into the synagogue, everybody should stand up. But he's not the type of person that everybody knows to stand up, right? Some people stand up,
right.
but not everybody knows how to stand
up. He doesn't want everybody to make a big deal. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, because he's a humble person. And then one of these putzes walks in, and I'm sure you've seen them. They're schnorrers, right?
Yeah.
Who wear these long jackets they bought on Amazon and have these long beards that mean absolutely nothing. And a schnorrer means a beggar, and they really are beggars. A lot of them are just homeless beggars that go around asking people for money and don't know anything, right? And it's obvious to anybody who knows anything. But he walks into the synagogue, and it especially happens in Sephardic synagogues in Los Angeles, which really burns my tuchus, right?
Yeah.
And they walk into the synagogue, and everybody stands up because look, it's a rabbi wearing a long coat and with a big beard.
The whole show.
You know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And everybody stands up. And he goes and sits down. Oh, who cares? So this woman walks up to the putz to ask a serious question. And the putz gives her a bad answer.
Yeah.
And whose fault is it? Whose fault is it? It's the fault of that Posek sitting next to me. It's his fault. Because he's supposedly so humble that she doesn't know who to go ask her questions about. And you know as well as I do that the easiest thing to do as a putz is to be a machmir and say it's not kosher and say you can't do it, right? Whereas a posek knows how to say, it's fine. You can do this. You can do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is like this. I barely when people ask me why I'm
grinds
not
your gears. Yeah.
When people ask me why I'm not from, like I rarely actually tell them this is one of the things. It's like
it's so funny. This is one of the things that when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, that really got on my nerves because I would, talk to the Rebbitzin at school and this and that. And hypocrisy was something that I would see straight through. And then I was like, look, you're how many decades older than me? Like, you're clearly giving me some nonsense, like, and you're all taking yourself so seriously. And yeah, that definitely put a big dent in the veneer of things for me. I think it's interesting. I'm like reflecting now, like I don't have such a strong emotional response to it now. Now I don't want to use the word dismissive. I'm almost like, oh, we live in a society, but because there is something to the, like, if there is nobody who rises to the occasion, there needs to be a number of people in a society who rise to the occasion. Otherwise, the whole society sort of just, we're like the lowest common denominator. Like, you'll always have hypocrites. You'll always have the people who are like, I'm so big and strong. And like, I've sort of come to accept that. but I think there's sort of like a balance that can be, you know, that
before
could be more
before the
pleasing than
Rebbe
not.
died, before the Rebbe died, if you wore long before the Rebbe told you, so everybody wears long on holidays and Shabbos and stuff in Chabad, but the people who wear long during the week, those are the people who are the real rabbis in Chabad. Okay? And if you wore long and the Rebbe hadn't told you to wear long, like, first of all, I don't even know how that would happen and if that ever happened and what the Rebbe did to deal with it. But that just didn't used to happen when the Rebbe was around, right?
Yeah.
And so the people who wear long generally are people who the Rebbe told them, okay, you need to start wearing long. So that, right? So
before it had some substance behind it because it came from an authority who was respected and all of this stuff.
Yeah, and the Rebbe would tell certain people, okay, you need to wear long, right? So Rabbi Reichik here, right? When the Rebbe sent him to Los Angeles, he told him, okay, you need to wear long, right? And other rabbis, he told them to wear long, right? Now, after the Rebbe died, nobody.
I support that, Zach, fully. Oh my gosh.
Zach, you can wear long. It's fine. You can wear long. Now there are people who have started wearing long because they decided to wear long themselves, or they've inherited a position, and the problem is now all the positions have become inherited because we don't have a Rebbe. Like, and I just see the corruption. You're not from the Chabad thing. I was more involved.
No, I'm from yeshivish background, but I mean, look, there's a lot of parallels there. I mean, we don't have a shortage of that of corruption either, you know.
Of people who shouldn't be wearing long, who are, and people who aren't wearing. What really gets me?
Look.
People should wear long, but they don't, right? Because look, I understand you're trying to be humble, but you have to look around you and see what's going on and take responsibility for that. And that's why it was like, I'm sorry, Chezi, I realize you don't want to go around calling yourself a rabbi, but that's why I want you to go around calling yourself a rabbi. Because you don't want to go around calling yourself a rabbi.
Okay. I don't want to talk too much about Chezi when he's not here, but
he's listening.
What I'll say, I hope he is. Or he'll see it later.
I'm pretty sure he's listening. He can jump in and defend himself if he wants.
No, look, I don't agree with your perspective in that I think Chezi, who am I even to say what Chezi is doing wrong or right with his life? Like, I think Chezi is living his life exactly how Chezi should and wants to live his life. And I think it's beautiful. I see him doing things that I don't see anybody else doing. And if that brings him down the path of like official rabbidom at some point, fantastic. And if it doesn't, like, fantastic. Because Jacob, Chezi, to me, I hear Chezi talking and I go, oh, that's a Gemara cup. Oh, that's a rabbi. I don't need the title, but I hear you saying you want him to have the title so other people should respect it and hear. But look, here's Paul listening. And Paul has said it quite a few times how much he respects Chezi. I respect Chezi. There's a whole lot of people here in Israel who respect Chezi. Like, when Chezi talks, people listen. And I think it's not about 100,000 people listening. It's about who's listening. What impact does that have? And like,
okay, I'll give you. Okay, so part of the reason is also his grandfather is turning 100.
Wow.
It would break my heart. It would Kanena, he should live to be 120. It would break my heart if his grandfather were to pass before he ordained Chezi.
Yeah. Look, I understand that.
And that's part of the reason why I'm kind of But Paul Vanderklay says, I guess Chezi is Protestant like me. It's a thing. Yes, we're very Protestant in this little corner of the Jewish internet.
I'm learning so much about Christianity. I have such a it's just such a blank space in my
You're
knowledge.
a Beis Yaakov girl. You're a Beis Yaakov
I am a complete Beis Yaakov girl. Yeah. I really am.
So
It's
funny.
amazing. I'll never get away from it, and I don't even want to. Like, the more I grow up, so to speak, I'm in my 30s. I'm 33 now. The more I appreciate it, and the more I realize how much of a part of me it is. Like, it just is, and it's so fascinating.
Okay.
You know?
What? Once when we're not on video, remind me to tell you a story about. Remind me to tell a story about a Beis Yaakov teacher. It'll blow your mind. It was. We'll talk. But Beis Yaakov for everybody. So Paul says, Jewish internet, your conspiracy controls that too.
We control everything, Paul. Everything.
Yes. There's this great joke anytime that Jews tell. Anytime I'm feeling down on myself, I just go into the anti-Semitic websites and start reading how great I am. Right? We control the world. Like, it's a chizuk, right?
It's so funny. It's so funny. I remember in college, people like encountering me as their like first Jew, at times, and they'd start making the money jokes, and I was like, "Do you want to see my bank account? Like, we're in the negatives right now." It ain't me.
You have to, and you have to, like, so when I wore yarmulke and had a beard and had tzitzis and stuff, and like, people would see me sometimes, especially when I was the first Jew they ever saw. Especially if they were like fundamentalist Christians, it was like an angel dropped out of their Bible, right?
Wow.
They would treat me with this reverence, and I'm like, you know what a putz I am? Like,
yeah. I encountered that renting an Airbnb in Florida. And I had never experienced that in my life. And as soon as I'd been staying there for a couple of days. It was a beautiful house. And as soon as she's driving me to the airport or something, the host, she was lovely, the hostess. And as soon as she finds out, she's driving me to the airport and she finds out I'm Jewish. And it was like the whole world shifted. And it was like, I was like the guest of honor. I was like the prophet. I was like this. She's like, can I have your number? I want to come on pilgrimage. And like, I was just like, oh my, this is a whole world bubble I have never encountered before, because you are now seeing me as something that like, that's like,
okay.
That was
Okay. So let me tell you what really, another thing that chaps my hide. So there are Israelis, especially secular Israelis, who find out about this and they decide, oh, this is a great way to make money.
Oh, icky.
Yes. And evangelicals left and right end up giving these people money for all kinds of things.
Oh, that's not very nice. That's kind of gross.
It absolutely breaks my heart. Absolutely breaks my heart. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a shame. I did not know that was a thing. I'm learning all sorts of stuff. I do want to point out that Mark says that he knows you're a putz, so you're safe.
At least Mark knows I am a putz.
At least
yes.
Mark can see you. Mark knows who. Yeah.
Yes, Jews are magical, mythical unicorns. This is true. Yes.
But do you not see my point, Jacob? That like,
let him do whatever he wants to do.
Not just that, not just let the boy live his dream, but like,
who am I to tell Chezi?
No. Yes, and yes, but he couldn't be here doing what he was doing if he was like, like, my father's a rabbi. Do you think he could be here having? Well, he could but it would be a lot more complicated to consider
Right.
every conversation with every pastor, with Father Eric, with this, and what am I saying, and like da 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 da. Chezi is a free man. There's a ton of value
look,
in that.
I mean, look,
and to be so learned and to be so free.
right.
I'm not saying he shouldn't get the. I'm not making an
Get the
argument
smitha,
against it. I'm just.
So maybe he actually did get ordained by his grandfather, and he's just not telling anybody.
He's just not telling us. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe, but I'm gonna call him Rabbi.
No, it's a deserved title. I think you should.
Yeah.
The only reason.
I say the same thing to Yosef. I don't know how much you've spoken to Yosef.
I'm not sure. Not sure if I have. Not sure if I have yet. I've definitely seen him on stream.
Okay, so you said something, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's such a Beis Yaakov girl thing to say."
Oh, what did I say? What did I say?
So you were talking about Daf Yomi, and you said it takes something like, I don't know, 15 minutes a day. I was like,
I'm glad you saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's such a Beis Yaakov thing to say, and I'll explain to you why. Because Beis Yaakov, unfortunately, unlike a lot of other places, doesn't teach the girls any Gemara whatsoever.
Yeah, right, true.
You guys don't even open a page and take a look at it and know what it's like.
Okay, yeah, Jacob, I got the point. We don't look Gemara.
and Beis Yaakov girls generally come from families where their brothers and their father, if they do Daf Yomi, it's like 15 minutes, half an hour a day, because their brothers and their fathers tend to be very advanced in their learning, so for them Daf Yomi,
it's quick.
Yeah, it's something they can do in 15 minutes because they're just chazering. They're just going over things they already know.
Yeah. My father and my brother, they know a lot of the text by heart. They know a lot of the commentary.
Exactly.
This, yeah.
So
you can ask my father, what is on page 382? He'll go, it's like.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So when you said, oh, it takes 15 minutes. So if you go to a very good Daf Yomi shir that's very quick, you can get it down to half an hour. For somebody like me, who I can still learn a Daf Gemara out of like an art scroll, it takes about 3 hours a day. And most people cannot. Yeah. So when you're like 15 minutes, Daf Yomi, I was like, there's a Beis Yaakov girl for you.
Yeah. That's so funny. I never had an interest in learning Gemara. My older sister did, and she had her whole, why can't I learn it? And that, hey, you guys are so impressive, So, yeah. Did she ever end up learning? I don't know. Funnily enough, she's very much a female chezi. She's an architect now, living in Jerusalem. She's managing a firm there. So she kind of took that route too. But unlike me, she's still a Beis Yaakov. I'm still a Beis Yaakov girl, but she's religious. She got married. She has a family, and she's doing the architecture thing. Her husband's a lawyer, so they're, But my family is very similar to Chezi's in that we had this split between like super yeshivish and then like a sort of, I don't know if you would call it American intellectualism. I don't think that's what it is. But okay, stupid big question here. What's a Gemara? Oh, good question. Jacob, that's for you.
So the Talmud is actually a commentary on the Mishnah, and the section of the Mishnah that's not the section of the Talmud that's not the Mishnah is called the Gemara, and by extension, the entire Talmud is called Gemara. And yes, Chezi is listening to us talking about him.
Oh, that's exciting. I'm here. I have my mic on me. I'm just grabbing a tea.
I
Hi,
should grab a
Chezi.
tea, but my tea
should.
kettle
You
from
should.
Amazon hasn't arrived yet. This is the first time I've been sick in this apartment, and I
Oh,
don't
no.
have a tea kettle.
Oh dear. I just ruined my tea kettle. I had
Microwave tea is horrible.
Yeah, no, it's just not the same. Thankfully, I have an urn. I just ruined my tea kettle because I was trying to make some candles, and I I was experimenting with the wax in the tea kettle. I knew I was gonna nuke it, but I did make a candle. It's oh dear. It's okay. It's cute. It's cute. It's like a little.
It's beautiful.
Thank
It's
you.
beautiful.
Thank you. It was way harder. You know, when they do all these tutorials online and stuff, they're like, oh, true, and then it looks perfect.
So
It was
Israel is a bit different than the United States, and Chezi, I mean, after the army, he was learning, and then he became an attorney, and then he became a designer. So I have no clue if it's like an architect in the United States where you have to go for 5 years, but he's I believe he's an architect in Israel. You know more about this stuff than I do. Don't you, Nahama?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was distracted. What?
So Luke was asking if Chezi is an actual architect, like an American architect.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what an actual architect is. I know that my sister studied architecture in New York, got her degree there, and is now an architect here. I don't know. There is always these licensing stuff that you have to sometimes retake tests
in the United States, in order to become an attorney, you have to go to school for 3 years after your bachelor's degree. And to become an architect, you have to get a bachelor's of architecture, which takes 5 years. And so in the United States, in order for him to have become an attorney and then an architect, it would have been 8 years after he left yeshiva. I don't know if he did all of that, but in Israel, you can become an attorney with a bachelor's degree, unlike here in the United States. Yeah, in a lot of places you can.
No, really? I could become an attorney. Is that what you're saying?
With a bachelor? No. You there's a bachelor's degree.
Oh, there's a bachelor's of law.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that I want to go back to school at all.
I'm going back to school. School starts on Monday.
Oh, that's exciting. That is exciting.
Yeah.
Wow. Is it all online?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's a little less exciting.
Well, I mean, it is all online, but you also have to. So it's a master's of social work, and I want to become a therapist, and so you have to also do practical work, and obviously that's not online.
Yeah.
So that's Will he learn manners? I am very, very respectful and polite to people I don't like.
Well.
No, I mean, if I don't know you and like whatever, but respectful and polite. That's one of the things I like about the music world.
You use abrasive language sometimes. You use honest, abrasive language, and I think for some people, it becomes difficult to absorb because it's past the line of what they can take in constructively. But I understand, like you've explained why and this and that, and I get that.
It depends on the individual person as well. Look, if I'm talking to somebody individually, right, I'm going to tone down based on how I'm talking to that individual, right?
Well, this is one of the reasons that I make so few appearances on the internet, not just here, but like anywhere, because if I'm on the internet, I'm talking to you, Jacob. Then there's the aspect of the chat, and then there's anybody who's can watch it at any point in time, and then there's all the people in my life who it's like thousands of people, right? Who could then, and so when I'm sitting, depending on what I'm talking about, like, yeah, it becomes way harder to communicate universally and get, because you just can't do it. It's just not. It's not possible, and there's not enough CPU in our brains.
When
and you need different messages for different people. It's just the same messages are not appropriate universally. It's just not.
When Paul took that clip of you speaking about your brother and your sister and put it on his main channel, I saw that. I was like, oh my God, did he ask her? And I texted him. I'm like, Paul, like, he's like, no, I asked her.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, if this gets into the Frum world and her brother, and oh my God.
No, he did. And then but I did give it like a bunch of thought later, like, ooh, like it gave me, look, it made me think, how do I even say, you see now I'm like, I don't even want to say what I want to say. Because I don't want, this has nothing to do with Paul, like, but that experience, along with many others, made me go, oh, okay, like I needed a good couple days before I like came back on the internet, because I was like, okay, I have to think about how this would affect him, and did I say a little too much here, and and da da da. And I did mention it to my sister, and she thought it was great. She thought it was fine. She's seen a couple of your just chattings, because she'll walk through the living room while I'm watching, so she's a little bit familiar with some of the characters here. Okay. It would be fun for her to pop on sometime, but
I would love
to. But even that, oh, she's lovely. She's so lovely. Even that, I'm kind of protecting her.
Your brother works for Agudas Israel.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's woo-hoo-hoo.
And he's doing public affairs.
Yeah. He's the PR. He's the main guy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was Avi Shafran for a long time, right? It's not him anymore.
I have no idea. I'm not really familiar too much with all the inner workings. But let me just say, like, I was talking to my sister about this the other day. We were both sort of commenting how he's like really a good guy for the job. He's like very neutral. He's extremely like, he's a good markup. Oh, look who's here. It's Paul. Hello, Pastor.
Hi. You're the only reason I'm on. I'm still salty with Jacob after what he did to Chad.
What did I do to Chad?
Oh, come on, Jacob.
Come on, Jacob.
Don't play innocent.
I love Chad.
I know. And he loves you too.
And
I love you.
You know as well as I do that, like, I can't speak to an individual person. And frankly, it's not Chad that there's somebody else who's a Lutheran who he still won't talk to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what can I do?
I don't know. Maybe it should be your favorite New Testament writer that commented on this.
Really? What
James the Just. But who can control the tongue?
No. See, that's the thing. It was not careless, Paul. It was not careless. It wasn't. It wasn't careless. Look, when somebody like John Vervaeke, who by nature cannot bring himself to be confrontational at all.
John can. He just picks his points. And that's actually the height of self-control.
Yes. And so my question has to be, like, okay, if he's unleashing fire against Martin Luther, like, yeah, it's very easy. It would be very easy for me to shut up and be the nice guy. Yeah, it would.
Okay. I don't want to derail this lovely conversation that you were having, though, because you're having a lovely conversation. And I saw Jacob live and thought, I'm not going to go there. But then I saw you on the channel. I thought, no, you're a lovely person. And you're probably civilizing Jacob as you speak to him. So, and then you're talking about Chezi, who of course is one of my favorite people.
No, but I want to say this, you know, I was just having a conversation with my older sister yesterday, and we were talking of all things about the royals and their, you know, Harry's new book and this and that. And when I was in my 20s, I knew somebody who worked for one of the major New York publishers. And he said to me, knowing my background, that I had grown up in she was like an Orthodox home, and I had left, and I had this whole like cool, you know, like story arc, you know, and this is before the Unorthodox series and the movies and the books. Like nobody had really done a tell-all book like this before. And he said, why don't you write a book? Like, look, this is, you know, like we could do this thing. And I had plenty to write. And I was like a threadbare college student, you know, I had no money. And so like the financial opportunity was like really shiny. It was really, really shiny. And I just couldn't shake the feeling that like, I just, you know, it was like this big, like, go do this like thing, this amazing opportunity, like you'll get on Oprah, you know, all that stuff. And I couldn't do it. And for years I was like wondering why. And there was a part of me that was like, the story's not over. Like, I don't know, And then I realized it's like, because if I write about the Jewish community, like, yes, these things are true. Yes, these things happen to me. Like I'd be writing a fully factual memoir, story type, autobiography, whatever. But I'd also be throwing everybody under the bus, you know? And there'd be no coming back from that. It would change who I am as a person. And like for the first time, honestly, literally yesterday, for the first time, I was like, oh, that's why I'm so grateful I didn't do that. Because Jacob, would it have been wrong to say all those things? All the criticisms, I could still tell you today, all the things that went wrong and that I would have written in that book that would have been perfectly justified, perfectly true, just like the Lutherans. I know nothing about the Lutherans, by the way, making no claims here. But like, still, when we say things, it affects people. And even if you have like a good intention, they're like, you know, there's Nechama, like people, and then there's people.
But Nechama, it goes back to the Posek and the Putz, right? That you
okay, but you're taking Jacob, you're taking an idealistic position on a personal relationship.
And that's what you have to do. That is the halachic process. That is the halachic process of looking and seeing and weighing your values and saying that my faith ultimately requires in this situation for me to act in this way.
Yeah, but your faith is causing someone else's suffering, not your own.
First of all, don't be so sure about how I suffer, Paul.
Fair enough.
Second,
Chad didn't deserve.
Okay, hold on. Chad didn't deserve. First of all, I'm not sure you know what's going on between me and Chad. I'm not sure you talk with Chad as much as I do.
Fair enough.
Okay. Second, this is precisely the problem with the woke and their supposed concern trolling, right? Because ultimately you have to think about who's being hurt, right? And it's not, oh, if I do nothing, nobody will be hurt. That's not true. It's, I will feel better about not being the person who actually did something when something needed to be done. You think it felt good right before Cassie's wedding to be making those videos and making her cry? You think that didn't affect me? It was her wedding.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good. It's good to see this side of you too. No, it is. It is. It's good to see this side of you too. Because a lot of what we see is
the fire breather. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. But somebody has to breathe fire.
Yeah. It's always a question of when, where, how, and figuring that out.
Correct. But the answer is not, there is no time to throw stones. There is no time to kill. There is a time to kill. There's a time when you have to attack somebody and you have to say, Martin Luther needs to die. And you say it, Martin Luther needs to die so that Chad doesn't need to die and Jordan B. Cooper doesn't need to die and all the people who are dying in the meaning crisis don't need to die. Martin Luther needs to die.
Oh, Jacob.
What?
This kind of, I mean, isn't again, I don't want to derail this conversation. This is a fair conversation for you and I to have, Jacob, but I don't necessarily, I'm frankly, I'm very interested in Nehemiah's story. Because I know you and
you should have Nehemiah on your channel for a conversation.
I very much would love to have her on my channel, but I don't know if that's a good idea. I am very sensitive about him. I'm pretty quick to share sometimes, but I am worried about it sometimes. Basically, if it's on the internet, it's sort of fair game, but at the same time, I know my channel's a little bigger and more exposure might be difficult. So
yeah, no, it's funny because I was thinking about how it would be nice to talk to you, Paul. And then I thought, oh, if we had a randos conversation, my disclaimer before would probably be something like, if you want this to be an honest and frank conversation with you, I don't know that it can go on the internet. There's just some things that cannot be said.
No. But it is like, go ahead.
There's certain harm that could not be mitigated. I can't take that. I can't take that aspect and just surgically ignore it. Like they're real people with real lives. And I would also really want to tell you the real story. You know what I mean? Because you deserve that. And I think that would be fun.
Yeah. Nehemiah, what I was trying to explain is there is a downside to you not explaining, because you know as well as I do that there are several people who have told their story and they have embellished and they have made bad critiques, and those bad critiques have in fact been used by people in the Orthodox Jewish community to dismiss them and the real criticisms, right? These people get like Unorthodox and lots of these books, right? They're not serious, honest critiques like yours would be, not loving critiques about things that need to be changed within the Orthodox Jewish community. And that's part of what keeps the Orthodox Jewish community, because somebody like you who loves their family and is actually in it, like, did you see Trembling Before God?
No, that rings a bell, but I don't think
it was almost like 20 years ago it came out. That was a good documentary. It was a really good documentary, and it made waves both within the Orthodox world and outside the Orthodox world, because it was a serious treatment of and I would say basically fair treatment of homosexuality in the Orthodox Jewish community.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of that. I wonder if my sister has. And
yeah, 20 years ago, you would have been in Beis Yaakov and not hearing about this stuff.
True.
2001.
Yeah. Well, I was born in '89. Yeah. I know I'm a baby. I don't. Oh gosh. Anytime. I don't have an urge. Oh God, this is gonna make me sound terrible. I don't have an urge to save the world. I don't have an urge to save the Orthodox community. I don't have an urge to fix everybody from the meaning crisis. Like, I think anytime I do go down, like, have the urge to go down that path, it sends like these big red signals of like, wait, what's going on here? I'm like very much trying to, like, keep what's important, which is mostly like my personal relationships and my life, and like, but yeah. Like, but okay, but so I'm not going to show you guys this picture. It's too personal. The reason I keep getting sucked into these conversations in these corners, I've been in other places, like I've been in really interesting places on the internet. And my sister and I were talking about this, how like she's in the gay world, like the American gay world. And like, I'm here in this little corner right now. And like the parallels of what's happening relationally are like spot on, you know, the patterns that are happening, you know, Mark can tell you about all this. Right. And so like, there's a reason I'm like so drawn in, because like a lot of this, I look at it and I go, oh, okay, I know what I'm looking at. I kind of see this, I kind of see that. So it's hard to stay away. And I also have a lot of time in my hands. So, but like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's my job to tell my story. I don't want to. Okay, this is going to sound terrible. I don't think many people deserve it. Like, just to be really frank.
That's fair.
I really don't. I really don't think most people deserve it, or that they've earned it.
Yeah, that's very fair. What fascinates me is, so I started Hanshu. Hanshu put me onto this show on Hulu called was it Rami? It's about a young Muslim man in North Jersey, of course, in a very Muslim community who's navigating Islam and New York City culture. His uncle is in the diamond business with a whole bunch of Jews, and it's the show is it's a pretty it's a fairly I talked about it in today's video a little bit. I got to be careful recommending it to religious audiences who are fairly sensitive about explicit discussions of sexuality, drugs. But a lot of the stuff that, say, a young 30-something in Hoboken or Hackensack might, very much
would be dealing with.
He, on one hand, it's very much this corner in that he's fast. He sort of really wants to be Muslim, but can't really give up the sex or the porn. And each of his friends have something that they're sort of living in, but also something they can't give up. That's very much outside, and so whether it's conservative evangelicals, obviously within the Jewish community, all of these thick religious cultures are wrestling with similar things, and it's the similar things that we're wrestling with, even though there are distinctives within our similarities and distinctives within our thick religious cultures that. That's basically prompting this so many of the discussions in this little corner. And what's amazing is that maybe someone who grew up Baptist in Georgia might meet someone who grew up Baptist in Arkansas, and they'd be like, yeah, of course it's the same thing. But then when you meet someone who grew up, conservative Jew or conservative Islamist or conservative Hindu or Sikh, suddenly it's like, wait a minute. How can we be having parallel experiences with this?
Why would you expect anything other?
Because
these are very different backgrounds.
Yes, the particularities are different.
Human beings are human beings, and there's only one God.
So says Jacob. That's it.
Yeah. Yes.
We figured it all out.
Yep. There's only one God. That is the basic thing I know.
And the right and wrong. Go ahead.
I was going to say I really loved. There was a conversation the other day with Sherry, and who else was there? It was two other gentlemen. Where the idea of a God of your own understanding, and I was like, oh, that's the thing I always kind of thought but never had the words for. So I really like that.
Yeah, that's from Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
That's why I say I want to be Chad when I grow up.
Well, you can. Well, it's not too late to become an alcoholic, I suppose, Jacob.
There's still time.
That isn't the point, but that's actually why I went. I took the substance abuse counseling course, and Lance and Chad actually they have a kind of alcoholics show. They do. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
I want to mention. Yeah, I want to mention one other thing. One of the areas of society I dabbled in 2019-20 was the United States political arena, and for about a year and a half, I was very much like all around the people who were like, let's save the world, or we're gonna, I was very outwardly focused. All of my energy was very outwardly focused. I wasn't really, my personal life was, running how it was running, but, I like played a little bit around in Andrew Yang's campaign. I helped a friend run his own congressional campaign after that in New York against Nadler, and that was fascinating. And like there came a moment, and that like before I made the choice to go into politics, and like dive into that whole crazy arena, I remember having a whole talk with my dad about it. Like, this is kind of nuts, but what do you think about this? And should I do it? And I kind of didn't really have much interest in anything else, and it was the only thing that really piqued my interest at the time. That's really why I did it. But what can I say? I learned a lot from that experience, but there came a moment in time where I sort of was like, oh, this is all kind of useless. Like, this is useless, and I'm wasting my time, and so it's not really worth me spending time here anymore. It was very nice, but now it's a waste of my energy. And what if I spent all of this energy that I'm like producing so much, and like just turned it inward? And so then I did that for like a year and a half. And then like a bunch of like things I dreamed of that I didn't think were possible for me, like just manifested just for that switch of the focus. So I went from these like very extreme of like focus outward, like let's save America, whatever, to like, let's just do whatever Nahama really wants to do. Like, I'm going to go live on the beach. I'm going to like, whatever. I think where I'm at now, because I've kind of done that selfish thing long enough. I say selfish in a very actually positive way. It was great. It was really perfect. Finding my way back, because I was like super public and then I went super private. So now I'm like, the corner is kind of like pulling me in. And so I'm like, oh, do I want to be public? And my life has always been, well, not always, let's say the last, for sure since 2015, like extremely relational. Like my focus is on my family and myself, my friends, like, those bonds are what's important. At the beginning of 2020, I made like a very marked decision that I'm going to even focus more on my relationships. And I had like a bunch of conversations with people in my life, like, okay, let's solidify this thing because everything's about to go like that, and this is the foundation. So like, let's just make this, like, do we want to have a consensus that like this is going to be where we're working off of? Like, we're going to disagree on like everything, but like when we come back here, we're supporting each other. And that was really, really good. See, Paul, you get me talking and I say all these things, and then I remember, oh, I'm on the internet, and it is really hard to remember that, like, oh, look, there's all these people listening, and I'm thinking, okay, what about all those people that I worked with in politics? Am I gonna hurt anybody's feelings? Am I gonna, like, what if something slips and I have a resentment that I haven't quite let go of? You know what I mean? And it's like, these are real people.
Yeah.
These are real people.
Yeah.
It's very, this is a big challenge when I'm in, and when I'm in the same room with someone, it's like, and you can read the energy and you can contextualize. It's a whole different level of communication that's required. And I don't think it's even, I think Mark had said this, I don't think it's even possible to, like, I don't know if it was Mark. But yeah, I'm finding myself now in a place where I don't know if I'm trying to meld the two together. Maybe I'm just bored.
No, you're working. You're working on this. And again, I think that your attraction to this little corner is many of us are working on similar things. A lot of people. I mean, I am. There are ways in which I'm sort of a fringe personality. I'm sort of on the fringe of the Christian Reformed Church, even though I do have influence in it. I'm sort of a liminal figure in a lot of different spaces, including this little corner, because I am deeply committed and embedded within my religious tradition, but I do talk with other religious traditions. But a lot of what we are working on, people who are sort of on the edge of a religious tradition, is trying to maintain those personal relationships while also being honest with where we've gone and what we've come to and the decisions that we've made about our lives, in terms of observance and not observance, in terms of community participation or not participating with the community in that way. And part of this is created, I think, simply because part of what the West has done with the state and individualism and the economy and all of this machinery that we've developed is we now have afforded spaces outside of family and outside of religious communities, which are originally outgrowths of family. And now we can actually survive in these places with jobs and insurance and facilities and institutions. But all of those personal relationships continue to be important for many things that none of this other safety net can actually afford. So and so then, you know, the telling your story is I mean, it does amaze me how many people come in for a randos conversation, on one hand to at least have the talk with me because they've seen me doing it, but then also with the desire to share. And it's risky, but it does have its rewards. And but again, that's not a on-off thing. Everyone has to figure out where are the boundaries, what should be shared, what shouldn't be shared, how should we speak with our enemies, how should we speak with our rivals, how should we speak with our friends? Because, you know, friend and enemy aren't that far away, because the tighter you get down into the friendship relationship, the more combustion potential there is for conflict, which make things meaningful. So no, I completely understand just from the little tidbits. And I think we also have a sense with each other that, you know, oh yeah, they're working on this too. I wonder what I can learn from them.
Yeah. One thing that I really like is, you know, I've often felt, no matter what arena I'm in the last like decade and a half, that people would see parts of me, but they're getting 10%, 20%, and they think they're seeing the whole thing. But that there's all these contextual pieces that, like, if you've been to this arena, you haven't been to that one, and you certainly haven't been to that one. And I've hopped around in the world and embedded myself in such different places that it certainly felt like I've become a person who felt like, okay, well, I don't think that people really knew what they were looking at, and that's okay. That's what happens when you experience a lot. And I understand it. But what I really liked about coming here, the reason I came here and I came on camera to begin with is because Jacob and Chezi were here, and I was like, oh, okay, they have the context of like my Beis Yaakov, the all girls Orthodox Jewish school, like that is very niche. They get my, understanding of Reiki. So we have that shared language. We have the Jordan Peterson language. Like it was unique for me to be in a place where like there's multiple languages I can use, and I can combine all of these in one sentence or a paragraph, and people go, oh yeah, I get what you're talking about, and not think like, oh, where did this alien come from? And I think that's what's so fun for me. I think that's one of the things. I do wish like I can say more, but that's that's a product of being on the internet. It's a product of being mindful of other people, being mindful of myself, of what people deserve. I do think it's really important to not give people things they don't deserve. Like, I really think that's important.
So I have to point out what a horrible pastor Paul is, because when you were talking,
if you fire him again, I swear.
So when you were talking about, that turning inwards, right? It reminded me that of ultimately, on my channel, I keep on talking about the most Jewish thing Jesus ever said is Mark 12, where somebody asks him, what's the most important commandment? And he gives the most Jewish answer you possibly could. He says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad va'ahavta, right? And you shall love the Lord your God. And the second one is like it, va'ahavta, you shall love your re'echa like yourself, right? And just that va'ahavta, right? And the love of God and love of your fellow man, like that's how the 10 commandments in Judaism, we split the 10 commandments. First 5 are between you and God.
So do the Calvinists.
And the second 5 are between what?
So do the Calvinists.
You guys, I thought your numbers were different. Okay.
They are a little different, but the 2 tables of the law, it's the same difference.
Okay.
Love of God and love of neighbor.
Right. And so they really are like, they have to go one with the other. It can't just be a physical thing or a spiritual thing. It can't just be the ideal, which is God, and the material, which is other human beings, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah. And I really look forward to the day when me, Jesus, and Jacob sit down together. I really look forward to that day.
I am really, really hoping he'll teach you some Hebrew.
Jesus will have some hard things to say to me. I'm not. I've got no question about that.
Me, I'm perfect.
But no, Nechema, I think your point is, this is why. I mean, this is why I'm very interested in encouraging people develop estuary spaces, because generally speaking, with estuary meetings, there are no cameras. And, in terms of the estuary protocol, it isn't necessarily given to, oh, here's my story, like a Randall's conversation. But, but you're exactly right that the internet is a place for some things, but not a place for everything. And there's something sacred about our stories that, and we all modulate that. When we go into the doctor's office or the government office with a name, birthday, those are little bits of our story. We'll share those more publicly. But then there's a whole lot in between where I'll share this part of my story on the internet, but there are parts of my story, I'm very open, but there are parts of my story I don't talk about on the internet. And someone who has watched me carefully would probably say, Paul never talks about this. Paul never talks about that. It's not unintentional. And so, but it is appropriate. And it struck me that you have, I think you've developed a healthy filter about, I'll talk about this, I won't talk about that. Oh, I'm a little worried about this, but that's also a process of exploration. I'll try mentioning this and then I'll see what happens. And then maybe I'll get a little bit and then, okay, well, I've learned about that. And then sometimes you get bit and you say, yeah, but that bite was worth it because these other things I gained. So, but I think part of the most at least for me, the most compelling part of the internet is, of course, other people and our stories. And when we compare notes, what can we learn? And having different, even though Jacob says they're all one, having different backgrounds and different stories and different traditions. That's why cousins are different than siblings. Aunts and uncles raised them. So there's some similarities, but there's also differences. And so that's why cousins are fun.
Yeah. That's why that conversation the other day with oh gosh, I have to remember who was there. Remind me, Jacob. It was Sherry. It was
Lance, Chad,
Lance.
And Jason.
It was just such a pleasure being a fly on the wall for that conversation because it was.
Yeah, I was sitting in the back the whole time. I didn't come on because I was like, let them talk.
Oh, was that on this channel?
Yeah.
Oh.
Was that a backhanded compliment, Paul?
It's both. I'm convinced there's still some of that Jewish stuff. It's got to be way back there in my hereditary. I don't know, all these. Maybe it's because I grew up in New Jersey or something. It's all these nuances of insult and compliment mixed together, and it's like, what is that?
Yeah. No, I thought that was really interesting, hearing about your Jewish background. It's where we come from. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. It wasn't a total surprise because my grandfather said to my father during the Second World War, if we were in Europe, we might be in some trouble. And why? We're Dutch. But then there was a secret when the court that I don't know if this is true or not, but it's a family story that when the courthouse burned down in Spring Lake, Michigan, that Hartog who sent his son over to America, changed the names of his children to anglicized names, and part of that is what's, I've learned I owe a debt to Jacob in terms of teaching me, some of the nuances of this whole community, of the whole Jewish story, and its engagement with modernity. One of the most interesting stories I read was the Alchemy of Air, which is the story of the fixation of nitrogen, and the Jewish scientist who figured out how to do that. He also, did that for the German war machine in World War I. He was a very, he very much wanted to be completely German, and so sort of pushed away his Jewishness. Invented, in fact, the gas that would be used in the Holocaust.
Yeah.
It's astounding story.
Wow.
Yeah. The
Wow.
Alchemy of Air, wonderful, amazing book. Sort of a biography.
So Paul's story in more Jewish terms. So apparently, somebody in his family, the great grandfather, married a shiksa, and the rest of the family, like, it's a frum family. He has cousins and stuff who are, married into the Rothschilds and to like all kinds of like the important families in Israel, living in Israel.
Wait, who are we talking about now?
Paul, his great
this Paul, our Paul.
Jacob started twiddling around with my genealogy.
And
wait. Paul Rothschilds.
Yeah,
I don't even know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, this is many generations back, but like I was looking on the Jewish web like thing, right?
Yeah, the archaeology stuff. Yeah.
But the one who married the shiksa, right? He like, they're like marrying not in the halachic community. You know, there's that part of the Jewish community that's not actually Jewish. They may be Christian, but like the Christians are like, oh, those are the Jews. So in Europe,
I'm just amazed that you know more about Paul's family now than he does.
Well, he can read it with context. Goodness. I can't. I just see names.
True, and now you have your own personal archaeologist.
Genealogist.
The Lord's going to send me a genealogist. He sends me Jacob.
Well, actually, Yosef is the one who does who does the real genealogical work. Oh. But so they're not Jewish, but they're also not Christian, right? And then get sent over to the United States and actually melts into the Dutch community, and of course the Jew becomes the pastor because I'm guessing knew how to read and write,
the Spanish Inquisition.
Literate. Yeah.
Didn't a bunch of that happen with the Spanish Inquisitions? We have like a lot of interesting things that happened out of that.
The Jewish culture of literacy, once you converted to Christianity, you often ended up becoming the pastors and the clerics and
Yeah, well, we're the brainy study types, so
yeah.
That was my my grandfather. His father was he was a painter. And so, but it's very interesting. Recently, when I was in Massachusetts with my mother, sometimes when we get together, we work on genealogy stuff. And I found the obituary from Spring Lake of my great grandfather, and he, just kind of reading between the lines of the obituary, sounded like quite a character. He outlived his son. My great grandfather died of a stroke on the wedding night, the wedding day of my grandparents, which is they had to cancel the wedding. Yeah, they had to cancel the wedding. So my grandfather, it's so funny because there's probably all this implicit Jewish stuff that they did. Like basically my grandfather canceled his wedding so he could sit with his dying father.
And he probably sat Shiva for 7 days and sat on a low chair.
They went out to. I didn't think but it's weird because there's. I always wondered why my mother's side of the family there's all this family. My father's side of the family there was not very much, and it's because of this stuff. And then we also figured out that I have one of my great grandfather's brothers, who also was brought to America when my great-great-grandfather came. He must have been disabled or something because he never married, lived his whole life either with another family member, kind of doing menial jobs. So he's probably disabled in some way, maybe mentally disabled. I don't know. So it's crazy.
Did you see the picture, Nechama, did you see the picture Paul put from on his Twitter of the monument?
I stay far away from Twitter. You couldn't pay me to be on there.
You tell like that.
Sorry. No insult to any of the. See, this is what I mean about talking. And then I realize I insult people who use Twitter. I once said something about McDonald's, and I got a whole speech the next day from a third party. You made that person cry because you insulted McDonald's, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. So that's not what I meant to do.
No, so
and so now I insult Twitter, and then I insult all the people who use Twitter, and
So one of the things, when we did a little bit of genealogy, found some of the places that my ancestors lived up in Friesland, which is kind of the northern part of the Netherlands, which is a kind of an ethnically distinct area. My mother's family is actually Frisian, but Appingedam is one of these areas. And so the first day we got to Europe, I had Van Donk and Job and Van Donk were very gracious. They wanted to show me the whole country. The Netherlands is small enough that you can do that. It's not a very big place. And so we went up to Appingedam. I'm probably saying it wrong, where it was very interesting. There's this synagogue, this little synagogue, and there was this Jewish community and a Jewish cemetery. And basically the Holocaust just wiped the Jews out of that community. But that's where all these Van der Kleis were from. And so there you could, and a lot of the family names were sort of in there. And so, and actually the town itself feels rather badly about it. And so they've not only sort of made a museum out of the synagogue, and they have these little stones in the streets where the people live that were taken. But it was I guess for a while it was an important Jewish area. It was kind of an important area in terms of trade. But
wow.
But yeah, they just got cleared out.
Did you ever go there?
I went there, yeah.
Really interesting. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
So we visited there and
That's so
saw all the
cool.
Van der Kleis on the, because they've got all the names of all the people who were taken. We couldn't get into the cemetery. I really sort of wanted to get into the cemetery because you can learn a lot by going to cemeteries. Even when I was in Michigan this past summer, I went and found the grave of my great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather, because we had never been to their graves before, and then found the people that are buried there because, you had children die. And I mean,
Have you been to that website, Find a Grave?
Yes. That's how I found them.
Yeah.
Oh.
And,
I found my grandfather's grave in Tehran.
Wow.
Somebody went through the Jewish cemetery in Tehran and took a picture of every gravestone. So I have a picture of the gravestone of my grandfather and my great-grandfather in Tehran.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Tehran.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
and your story too, Jacob. I mean, Jacob's got an amazing story too. So, yeah.
There's this sense of like all of this that might be lost, but like I'm thinking of a friend of mine from high school who like they have nothing. Like it's her parents and her grandparents. When it was her grandparents, they must be really old, great grandparents, whoever came to Ellis Island, I don't know who it was, they changed the name and everything before that is wiped. So she had nothing, and so like even there is like a sense of loss when I hear you talking about it, like, oh, what don't I know, and I'm finding out all these things. But it is amazing that we can still find out these things, that there's some it reminds me of, because I caught your talk, Paul, today that you posted on the way back from the post office, and that wisdom that the women were talking about, like the sense of wisdom that had been lost. There's definitely a little bit of that. Like I think about my grandmother's in her 90s now, and I have this little birdie on my shoulder, like, oh, you're not calling her enough. You need to get
her stories now while you've got them, because when she goes, she doesn't. The thing is, she doesn't even know the stories she has inside of her. And before
and I'm really fortunate.
My father's mother was a great storyteller. She wasn't Jewish. She was another shiksa. And she, you could get her to tell stories at the drop of a hat. So for a while, we just could get a little cassette tape and start recording them.
I'm listening. I have my headphone. Yeah.
Okay. Because they were just great stories, and so get those stories while they're still alive.
Yeah.
You do, Jacob, for your parents.
I tried. My dad and I are very, very similar.
Really? Then you speak to each other.
What?
And you speak to each other.
No.
They're both very stubborn, apparently.
Can't imagine.
You know, Jacob, you'd be surprised at what is possible. You'd be surprised. Sometimes it's just the right connection or the right thing that someone needs to relate to be able to see a little glimmer of reality that's just close enough to yours to be able to widen it a little more.
There's also one of the things. So it's. I think one of the problems I have is that oftentimes I'm too hopeful, and I have to learn to accept that some things I can't change, and some things I just, I can't make anybody else anything different, right?
No.
All I can do is change how I react to it. Yeah. So I'll give this example. So I've not been feeling well, and my father was gonna be by here, and he calls me and he's like, "Oh, can I come do anything for you?" And I'm like, "No, Dad, I'm just not feeling well." But I'm like, okay, you know what? He wants to come visit me. I said, why don't you come and pick up your mail? Because I've moved into where they used to live, so I get their mail. Okay, and yes, I did not pick these couches.
I've been thinking about that couch for a while, but keep going, please.
Yeah, I did not pick these couches. These are the couches my parents left. And so he says, okay, I'll be there around 4. And I'm sitting here waiting for him. And around 5, he calls and he says, oh, I'm with your uncle. We're on our way. And I'm like, no, Dad, I don't think that's appropriate. He's like, oh, it's okay. We'll just be there for 5 minutes. Like, no, Dad, it's not appropriate. He's like, yeah, we'll be there in a little bit. And he hangs up. And I got mad and I got all this stuff. And I'm like, how could he do this? And then I'm like, this is your father. You know your father. And I realized, no, I can't change my dad. So I called my uncle who's with him. And I said, Uncle, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well. It's not appropriate. And he's like, oh, I didn't mean to come up at all, anyway. And it's like, and until I was able to accept my father is who he is, and that's fine, I would never have been able to move on to call my uncle and be like, because obviously my uncle would never, ever invite himself over without an actual invitation. Right? And that's the type of thing that like made me be able to fire Paul, because I'm not going to change Paul. I just have to move on.
What would you do without Paul, Jacob?
What would I do without Paul? I would find another Paul.
What would you do without him?
I would find another Paul.
I don't think there is another Paul. I mean, good luck with that.
But that's part of the problem is like the Gemara says, all other people when they make a coin, all the coins look the same. And God made a coin with the same stamp, and each one looks different.
That's great. That's great.
I'll find where in the Talmud that's from, but it's one of my favorites.
Oh, that's a good one. All right, y'all. I should do some work, but it was great chatting with you. Great to see you, Nechema, and I hope I'm saying your name right. Nechama.
Nechama. Yeah, that's Nechama. Yeah, you should know, Paul. My grandmother, till this day, will not spell my name correctly. She spells it with an O. I don't know why. It's been with an A
because
since
of
my
the
birth.
commas. Because of the commas. It's Nechama.
Okay, Jacob. No. No.
Well, and we've only got one Jacob too, and he is a unique.
That's how you spell it, with the commas, right?
Yes, but that's in okay. We'll have this conversation.
That's in Ashkenazis, right? It's not in modern
Yeah.
Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, there's no difference between a commas and a pat.
Yeah. Well, Paul, it was great to see you and you, Jacob, as well. There was something that I was trying to make a connection. I think you got it more than I did, Paul, of the connection I was trying to make between my public and the internal introspection. I definitely still feel like there's a continuous grappling and exploration and negotiation of the private, personal, public persona and how that plays out. It's almost like I there was a part of a challenge that like I want to conquer this space, not the little corner, but like it's almost like I want to have the ability to be able to like, can I do it? You know, can I really be me and be out there? But
did you watch
and find a way that's appropriate?
Did you watch my video on parhesia, is how they say it, but parhesia?
I don't think I did.
It's
nobody watches your channel.
It's one of my shorter videos.
We only watch your channel so that we can be on it.
I've noticed. It's one of my shorter videos, but it's one of my better videos.
Oh.
And I talk about how this word, it's parhesia. I'm sure you know the word parhesia, right? Which means public in Hebrew, is parhesia, and it's actually like a Christian word. And it actually means free speech. And I actually spoke to you about this the first time we spoke, Paul, but like this word and what exactly it means, because to speak in public and to speak in private, right? So a Mechalel Shabbat beparhesia, as somebody who desecrates the Sabbath in public, right? That's a particular thing in Jewish law that's very, very important. And the popes have been talking about speaking with parhesia because that's something in the New Testament that's really big. And free speech right now is really big in like, we're talking about what is free speech and free speech absolutism. And that's why I made the video, and nobody pays attention to it. But I think it's really important.
Well, maybe you can have Mark post it on his channel with navigating patterns, and I'll watch it for sure on his channel.
Navigating pattern. There you go.
There's a rabbit hole I'll go down another day about this free speech, but I've also deliberately in the last few years designed my life so that I'm in charge of my speech. So even though there's all this like self-reflecting and like, what can I, no. I don't have any institution, job, party, parent. There's no body who's, I'm not worried about losing a job. And so that is, I think, something I'm grateful for, and something that it's like a powerful tool for me to use. So that's an interesting aspect of this as well for me. So I do get to I get to play more than other people in a sense, but I'm also limiting myself more than other people.
Well, what is your day job? What do you do?
I'm alive mostly.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'm not working at the moment.
Okay.
And so I'm not really beholden to anybody, which is
that's nice.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. Chad asked about the weather. Weather is we're getting all this California rain that we need. Got to do some roofing work here at the church because the roof on this building took a beating that first day. But it's always the first storm that they never quite imagine it's going to be bad. And then when they're like, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be terrible. It's like, nah, all the really weak trees already blew over. So there'll be fewer trees blowing over and more power will stay on. So we'll get through.
I'm planning on a visit to you, Paul. So yeah, you poor thing.
We're gonna go out for lunch again.
Sure.
Good. I had a good time. I really do love Jacob, and that's just the heart wants what it wants, and I don't know. It's something about Jacob.
I was telling my sister today, like, the relationship with my parents, it's a constant negotiation. It's not like we figure it out one day.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, we got it. It's like, no, we're always reevaluating. We're always renegotiating. Things change, things move. And I think that's okay. And I think that's necessary.
Yeah.
So, it's how we look out for each other, You cross the line, I cross the line. The serious play. Oh yeah, you bit me a little too hard. Okay. Well, no, you needed to be bit. Well, did I really? So I think that's okay. I think that's normal, and I think we'll figure it out. Well, okay. I've definitely said enough.
All right. I definitely have to.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. It really has.
Things. Great chatting with you guys. If there's not a video tomorrow, you're all to blame.
Yeah.
And for those watching, I should probably Bridges of Meaning Q&A tomorrow. I'm just taking questions from the Bridges of Meaning crew because so there'll be no questions from Jacob.
You won't have to deal with Jacob. It'll be good.
All right. Okay. Take care.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Yes, Mark, we should sell Jacob. Okay, people. I am going to end the broadcast. Hopefully this was good for you guys. Of course, if people wanted to chat, there's a lot of people speaking, and there are many people that I'm paying for to be able to run just chatting streams. Just saying. Bye, people.